Welcome back, everybody, to the 1987 Supermod. I'm Brad Drake, and today we're going to go over episode 7 in the introduction series, and this is going to be discussing how to import some new wrestlers and also to import some narratives. So, while I was going through the 1987 All Japan roster, I noticed that there were a couple wrestlers named on the roster at this time period in 1987 who were not actually in the game. This has gone on quite a bit over the last year that I've added to and built onto this mod. So we're going to go ahead and bring in 3 separate wrestlers today who are not in the mod that I have already added into the mod, and now we're going to import into our AWA save. The first wrestler is a wrestler by the name of Mark Regan. Mark Regan was a talented technical wrestler who started in 1984 and spent quite a bit of time in All Japan. The second wrestler we're going to bring in is Carl von Steiger. If you've never heard of the von Steiger brothers, you're missing out. They were tag team specialists who wrestled all over the United States and inside Canada. And Carl von Steiger in 1987 is still wrestling. And he's in All Japan and he's doing tag matches in All Japan. We've also gone ahead and created his retired partner, Kurt von Steiger, and we'll also bring him into the game. Lastly, we've created George Weingarth, who was also wrestling in All Japan in 1987, and we're going to go ahead and bring him into the game. George Weingarth was another one that was a journeyman that traveled around the United States to different territories. He had some mild success in the Paphos ICW, where he tagged with Lanny Poffo. Also, on top of bringing these wrestlers into the game, we are also going to introduce some narratives. I like to have narratives based on realism in pro wrestling, and an important thing I like to have is when wrestlers leave. So then you could actually go into the game and have them leave the actual company they worked for if you wanted to. Ken Patera is our first one who actually left the WWF on November 25th, 1988. Next, we have Brian Blair. We're going to add Jim Brunzell. We're going to add Tom Zink. And lastly, we're going to add the Junkyard Dog. So let's get to it. We're going to switch back to our wrestlers. We are going to bring up the game editor. And this is in games. This is in my AWA save. Remember, these wrestlers are already added into the mod. So all we have to do is import them. So the first one we're going to bring in is Mark Regan. We imported into the game. Mark Regan is now in the game. So let's bring up the von Steiger brothers. Here's Carl von Steiger. We've now imported him. Here's the retired Kurt von Steiger. We've now imported him. Now narratives. Let's go ahead and import our narratives. The first narrative we're going to bring in, as we talked about, was Ken Patera. He's brought in. Brian Blair was the next one. That one is brought in. Brunzell. That one is added in. And I'm forgetting the last two others. Tom Zink and Junkyard Dog. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Tom Zink narrative, Tom Zink formed a very successful tag team with Rick Martel called the Can-Am Connection. And one day, Tom Zink just decided he no longer wanted to wrestle for the WWF and left. He and Martel had wrestled the night before. They had a normal match, and he did not show up to the building the next day and did not talk to anybody. He just disappeared. So eventually the WWF officially fired him, and Martel ended up finding a new partner in Tito Santana, who went on to win the World Tag Team title. So it worked out okay for Martel, but it was very strange behavior from Tom Zink. Tom Zink then bounced around some territories and eventually landed again in WCW, where I believe he pulled the same thing in WCW. Sadly, Tom Zink passed away a couple years ago. Tom Zink always had a great look. He was a good athlete. He was just a little bit nutty. Lastly, we're going to add the Junkyard Dog when he leaves the WWF. So there we go. That is now imported. Let's take a look at some of our wrestlers who are going to be free agents in the game. Let's do a search for the Von Steigers. I was kind of surprised that the Von Steigers were not in the game to begin with. And why did only Kurt Von Steiger come up? Karl Von Steiger did not get brought into the game. We're going to go ahead and head back, and we're going to make sure that he does get brought into the game. There's Karl Von Steiger. Oh, you know what? It's saying his name is already in use. Okay, that's why. He's only wrestling for Japan at this time. So let's bring up the Von Steigers. There they go. There we go. My search was messed up, folks. That was the issue. So again, I did some research on the Von Steiger brothers. I heard a lot about them on the early days of Ron Fuller Welch's podcast. He spoke very highly of the Von Steiger brothers, how talented of a team they were. So then when I was watching some footage from 1987 All Japan, I went, oh, look, Karl Von Steiger is still working, and he was at that time. At this point in time, Karl Von Steiger was on his own. As I said, Kurt Von Steiger had retired a few years before. Karl would only work for All Japan and do tours for Japan. His last tour occurred in 1987, so technically he's going to retire at the end of this year. So he would get picked up by All Japan, and he probably will in this game, no doubt. Unfortunately, I have not tied in the title history yet. That's going to be difficult because the Von Steigers held titles all over the place in many different promotions. It's going to be quite the time-consuming effort to get them to be linked up with their titles to show up in that title history. But we will do it. We will make it happen. That's one of my enjoyable things to do. There's Kurt Von Steiger, who's retired at this point, as we know. He's was another one that was a heck of a wrestler. Kurt Von Steiger ended up being a really good trainer. He trained Bobby Jaggers, Big Bill Anderson, Afa of the Wild Samoans, and a few others. So let's go ahead and then take a look at Regan. It may have been pronounced Reagan, I'm not certain. The only picture I could find of Mark Regan or Reagan was that picture. I don't know too much about him. What I saw in footage looked like he could wrestle pretty well. I saw him in a match tagging with the Destroyer, actually. So there he is. There's Mark Regan back in the game. And who was our third wrestler that we added? Let me look it back up here. And it's George Weingarth, who was also wrestling for All Japan at this time. I don't think we added him. Let's get back there and let's get him added in. Okay, George Weingarth is now in the game. So there he is. He looked like he had a little bit of a cockeye. He played an Arab often. He also wrestled as King Cobra for a while. George Weingarth was a good wrestler. No doubt about it. He was fundamentally sound. He seemed to fit the Japanese style well. So I wouldn't be surprised if All Japan picks him up also. So that's our add-ins, folks, for this week. And like I said, we're going to go ahead and get the title history updated for the Von Steigers and make them look more like the real deal for the game. They did win titles all over the place, so it's going to take me a while to add all those in and link in what's already in the game. But like I said before, we're going to make it happen. So that's our update for the mod for this week, and hopefully you learned something. If you've been looking for how to do that, that's a good instructional video for you. So thanks a lot, folks, for tuning in again. I really appreciate all your support, all the comments. You're really helping things grow. We're doing very well as a community for this 1987 Supermod. And I ask you to just please keep spreading the word. Help us get this out there. Let's get this mod out there better. Let's get more people playing it because it is a lot of fun and it is so historically accurate. If you haven't already, please give us a like and also subscribe to our channel. Also, if you would like the mod and you don't have it already, visit my website, braddrake.net/contact. Let me know you want it. I'll be more than happy to send it over. Also, join our community on Facebook, facebook.com/1987supermod or facebook.com/1987supermod. So long for now, folks.